There's a plethora of budget katana brands out there. How do you know which ones are worth it? Hello, this is Kyle, also known as Alientude, and today I am kicking off a series of reviews of budget katana with a Romance of Min custom katana. Now, if you don't follow my channel and look at the community tab, you may not realize that I'm in the midst of moving. So this is actually going to be the last review I record at this house, and that's why I'm outside, because the normal place I record is just full of boxes. So excuse the dogs barking in the background. This is about the best I could do. One other thing I should mention is that this is a review sample. I did not buy this katana. Romance of Min sent it to me for an honest review. I did provide my feedback to them and they responded. I'll sprinkle their responses into the review as I go. Let's talk about Romance of Min. Now, my camera ate some footage, so I'm just going to be doing this while looking at their website. They are generally priced a little bit lower than your typical custom katana. And they go with a lot of options, especially in the Tsuka, koshirae area, and a lot of saya options. They have a few different steel options that, with carbon steel being listed. Since they don't say the actual type of steel, I would guess it's 1045. They have a manganese steel, which is a fairly common Chinese steel that I think is a little bit better than 1045, but not much. Spring steel, which is probably 5160, pattern welded steel, and T10 steel. Now the spring steel, pattern welded, and T10 all cost a little bit more. If you look, I'll choose sharp. Carbon steel and manganese is just the default 180 price. Spring steel adds 20, pattern steel and T10 adds 50. The sort I got is T10. And now you can choose. This has actually increased a lot of options since I actually ordered my katana. You can choose a bunch of different hamones and some blade colors. This is the one I chose. Real hamone and a blue. Let's go look at the options. So you can see they actually, down here, here's where they start showing you some of the more options. They actually have more geometry than they used to. It used to be very few options, but now they have anakubi zukuri, they have some higher degrees of polish. So quite a few options now. That's pretty cool. That's new. You can choose a bohi or no bohi, and then a bunch of saya. Now they've actually increased their options here some more too, because I noticed there's at least one of these that, there's a few of these that increased the price, which was not the case when I customized this katana. But the majority of them are in the base price, and as you can see, there's a lot. I believe this is the one I got, I believe. But yeah, there's a lot. There's some pretty wild color schemes and paint and just a whole lot of options here, more than you see in most custom katana. Wow, that one's 150 extra. Wow. Now, unfortunately, they don't really tell you what you're getting for this extra price, other than some pretty cool paint schemes. But aside from their unique ones, they also have some of the more generic Longchuan saya, like this one you'll see pretty much everywhere. So we'll just pick a saya that doesn't have extra price. And then the subas, like you can see, they have a lot of them. When I say subas, it's actually the different koshirae. Along with it, you don't choose individuals, you choose a package. You could probably contact them and get individual pieces from each if you wanted to. I don't know. Now, my biggest complaint about their listings here is they don't say what these are made of. I really do wish it would tell you what they're made of. This is the Tsuba set I got. And you can go through here. These are your pretty traditional Longchuan ones. These ones look like they might be these more basic looks are oftentimes iron or brass. These might be brass. But then we get into the stuff that looks plastic to me. This just does not look good to me at all. I guess if you're into this kind of, anime style, good for you, but not my taste. So as you can see, quite a few options in koshirae. And the habaki, they've got your standard, leopard pattern, the raindrop pattern. They've got a few unique ones, including the one I chose, which is this one right here. Kind of a copper looking, almost like snake scale texture. But they have quite a few options, more than you would normally see. And then Ito wrap, which looks like it's about the same options as when I customized this. This is the one I chose. I like that they say that it's PU leather here because they don't hide that it's fake leather. And then some options. So all told, mine would have cost $230 based on the extra price for the T10, but everything else was pretty much bog standard. So let's take a look at the saya. First off, the fit is very good. There's absolutely no rattle here and perfect retention. Doesn't shake out, but it takes pretty much no effort to draw it exactly as you would want. So that's a really good thing that you don't get very often on budget katana. Oftentimes the saya fit is just lackluster at best. Now, this one has this really eye-catching speckled color, which has like these gold specks in the brown saya, and it's, like I said, it's very eye-catching. However, the specks are very noticeable tactilely, and the lacquer on this, it ripples quite a bit. I did talk to Romance of Min about that. They said that's a quality control issue that they're going to try to improve. Now, this does look like it has a buffalo horn end piece and koiguchi. I believe they are real. I don't really have any way of knowing. And actually, it looks like the kurigata might be as well. The shaping of the koiguchi is actually pretty well done. It's pretty clean. There's not a bunch of gunk in here that you see on a lot of saya. So I like this. I actually quite like what Romance of Min does with their saya options. There's a ton that you just don't really see. You know, when you visit a bunch of custom katana brands, you'll start recognizing all the pieces. You know, they all, generally speaking, share the same suppliers, so you're going to see the same Tsuba, the same Fuchi, the same koshirae, etc. And you know, you'll see the same sayas. Now, Romance of Min definitely has a lot of those same things, but they also seem to have more options in saya that you don't normally see. And the Sageo here is a PU leather. We'll get into more of that when I talk about the Ito, which is the same material. Want to help out my channel and support a great cause? Then check out my merch store at www.alien2.com. 25% of the profits of every sale will be donated to the American Cancer Society, and the rest will be used to help the channel continue to grow. Thanks for your support. So let's talk about the Tsuka and the koshirae. The first thing that might jump out at you is this Ito wrap, which is quite unique. I haven't seen one like this before. From what I understand, this is in the style of the Satsuma Rebellion. This might be called Shonai Satsuma. It's designed as a really easy Ito wrap that could be done in the field with pretty much whatever materials you had on hand. It uses less Ito material than a more traditional wrap, and oftentimes there's no manuki like on this one. Now the Tsuka shape is actually quite good. It's got a nice, generally speaking, pretty flat plane here, and it's rounded well, and edge alignment works perfectly. So I really like the shape of the Tsuka. The Ito wrap is pretty tight. I can move these aren't diamonds around, but the shapes around a little bit, but not too bad, and they don't really deform. They just kind of budge around a little bit, but it stays intact pretty well, and it gives a really good grip. I have no problems, you know, keeping the grip aligned as I want. I can't really move it around with my hand gripped on it. Now, the Ito wrap is also, it's pretty sloppy. If you look around the koshirae, it bulges over the koshirae quite a bit, and it does the same, actually even worse, at the fuchi right here. And the knot here at the end is pretty sloppy as well. There's a little piece here sticking out the end of it, and overall it's not a particularly well done wrap. It's effective, but it just doesn't look very professionally done, frankly. Again, I talked to Romance of Min about this, and it's something that they said that they are working on improving, They actually sent me another review sample and asked me to compare the Ito wrap on it to that one. When I get to reviewing that sword, I'll go ahead and do that comparison then. And thanks to my camera eating some more of my footage, we're here at the new house. Just a quick setup here to refilm a few things. So the koshirae here, the Tsuba, Fuchi, and Kashira, they all have decent casting quality. You can make out quite a few details here, but the thing that's really noticeable is that they all have very distinct casting lines. Right around the rim of the Tsuba, you can see where it was cleaned up somewhat, but not enough. It could still be cleaned up more. And it's a shame because it's not a lot of effort to clean them up, and it really should be cleaned up. The material of these, I wasn't sure what it was at first because it doesn't say on the website. I really wish they would list what these materials were. At first I thought it was going to be brass because there's spots on the Tsuba where you can see this steel coloring coming off, and it was kind of brass looking underneath. But I asked Romance of Men, they said it's an alloy, which to me tells me zinc alloy, pretty much the lowest end you can get, which means not very durable and just not very good. I really wish these were a higher quality, whether it be brass, iron, pretty much anything is better than zinc alloy. Now those casting lines, the worst part is by far the habaki. Right here on the spine, there is not only a casting line, it's very noticeable by touch and sight. It's very prominent and it really should have been cleaned up more. Now on one side of the koshirae, I noticed some white stuff on it. I assume it's dried epoxy, something that really should have been cleaned up before it got sent to me. The one nice thing I can say about this, which I can't say about most of the custom katana I've had, is that all of the koshirae are tight. There's absolutely no wiggle on the habaki, Tsuba, Kashira, Fuchi, nothing. They're all absolutely tight, which, you know, is a big improvement over pretty much all the other custom katanas I've had, whether it's Jaku, Hanban, Swords of Northshire. The only other company that I've had that does custom katana that has not had loose koshirae was Ryujin. So I'm very much appreciative of that. I do not like when the koshirae start coming loose. Now there's two mikugi on this katana, and unfortunately they're pretty well covered up by the Ito wrap. This one is a little, I could probably get this one out, but this one up closer, right here, it's pretty much completely covered, and I would have to move the Ito quite a bit to be able to get it out. So I ended up not disassembling this one. I would have really liked to take a look at the tang, but I didn't want to mess up the Ito wrap completely. The habaki here is pretty different. It's got this really, almost like a scaled texture, almost like a lizard or snakeskin scale, which looks really cool. And I chose it because it's so unique. You know, most habaki you see are just your standard brass, or they've got that leopard print or the raindrop pattern that you'll see on a lot of habaki. And this one was different, so I was like, that's the one I want. The fit here is pretty much normal for a custom katana. There's a lot of gaps in different places, but at least it's tight. That's the most important thing. And now it's time to talk about the business end, the blade. Unfortunately, due to the move, I just did not have the ability to get the full measurements schematic that I normally do. So I'll try to get that up sometime in the future, but it might be a little while. So the sword does feature a good amount of distal taper, starting pretty thick and tapering, it looks to me like about 40 to 50% of the total width down to the tip. That's a good amount of distal taper for a katana, which typically means it's pretty maneuverable in the hand. I'll get to that in handling in a little bit. But overall, it's a pretty decent taper. Now this sword is made of T10 steel, and it does have a real hamon in it. And that hamon is pretty noticeable, especially in the right light, but because the blade is so dark, it does make it a little hard to see, thanks to that blue coloring on it. Now the bohi travel most of the way through the blade and end in almost the exact same spot on both sides. That's not bad. The geometry of the sword is a little interesting. So a shinogi zukuri, the bog standard katana that we're all familiar with, should have a yokote here. That's where the kasaki changes geometry and into the tip. Now, there's no yokote here at all, but you know, in most budget katana, the yokote is purely ornamental. It doesn't have an actual change in geometry there, so that's not a big deal. Now, a sword type that doesn't have a yokote or change in geometry is shobuzukuri, where the tip is more leaf-shaped, but that's not really the case here either because of the shinogi G here. The way it travels up in here, it's much more like a shinogi zukuri, just without the yokote. The tip is pretty well formed, although there is just a tiny bit of, I won't even say blunting to it, it's just not quite perfectly formed. Again, not a big deal at this price point. What is problematic, even at this price point, is the extreme amount of rippling on the surfaces of the blade, both in the bohi, on the flat of the blade, and on the spine. I can just run my fingers along it and feel the hills and valleys of this blade. It's an excessive amount of rippling, and that's just a lack of quality control, which is exactly what Romance of Min said about it when I contacted them. Told them, you know, this amount of rippling really isn't acceptable even at this price point. They said, you know, they acknowledged it. They said it's a quality control issue and it's something that they are working to improve. So overall, I'd say it cuts well. Pretty much exactly in line with where I expect a katana in this price range to cut. And now some brief handling notes. So this katana is quite fun to move around. It's generally speaking pretty light and easy to maneuver. It's got a lot of distal taper. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it starts considerably thicker here at the habaki and does do a nice even taper. It's generally speaking a bit on the light side, so and like I said before, it doesn't have a lot of niku. Overall, it's pretty fast and maneuverable, even one-handed. Yeah, it's actually quite maneuverable one-handed. So when you get a second hand on it, it really does let you move it very quickly. All right, so let's talk about some areas that Romance of Min could improve on. And this is pretty much all going to come down to quality control. First off, the Ito wrap. You know, these unsightly bulges at both ends and just the general sloppiness should really be improved. Even on a budget katana, even one that's around $200, you know, it should have a bit more professional looking wrap. And, you know, that's not something that's particularly difficult for them to do. Similarly, the casting lines on the different koshirae, they really should be cleaned up better. Again, this is not something that is very difficult to do. It doesn't take even that much time. You know, probably like an hour of work at most, and they could have that all cleaned up. So it's just something that's lacking that could be cleaned up for them very quickly, very easily, and hopefully they will take that advice and start doing that. Now, the last thing that they really should improve on is the quality control on the blade. The amount of rippling here is just outrageous. It's not going to affect the functionality of the blade. You know, you saw the cutting. It was a very effective cutter, but just it's a lack of refinement that is just counter to the concept of a katana. You know, the katana is such a refined design. The Japanese spent so much time really just bringing it to the exact shape that they want. And having this much lack of care in the blade geometry is a real shame. It just kind of goes against what a katana is all about. Now, luckily, I did talk to Romance of Men about this, and they said they are actively working to improve their quality control. Hopefully, they are going to be able to do that. And now it's time to talk bottom line. This katana would have cost $230 if I bought it. Is it worth that price? Well, unfortunately, I don't think it is, but I don't think it's that far off. First off, if they just fixed the blade rippling, I think it would be getting very close to worth the price. If they fixed all the things I mentioned in the areas of improvement, yes, it would be worth it. It is actually a very effective cutter. It's fun to use, and it's a decent katana with a few flaws that just bring it down to not quite good enough. Now, if you didn't get the T10 material, if you were okay with what they list as carbon steel or manganese steel, this price would have been $180. And at that point, it's starting to get a little bit more into reasonable. In fact, I think even with the rippling, it might even be worth $180. It'd be still a little close, but I think I wouldn't be that upset about the rippling at that price point. One of the things I do actually really like is their saya options. With most custom katana brands, getting anything beyond just an absolute bare bones saya will add anywhere from $20 to $100 to the cost, or even more. Romance of Men, they have them all a ton of options, and they don't add to the price. So you do get the option for a little more bling, a little more personality in the sword without needing to break the bank. That's true of the coloring on the blade also. That doesn't really change the price of the katana, and if that's something that you want, it's not a bad deal. I don't think they're quite there with this custom katana that I could say it's actually worth the price, but they're not terribly far off, mostly because the price is low. You know, $180 to $230 for a custom katana is not bad. That's pretty much as cheap as you're going to get without going to just junk. So I think Romance of Men is close. They're just not quite there yet. Now, from what I've seen, Romance of Men is very open to feedback and are looking to actively improve, which is something that is really welcome. If they can improve some of these flaws, I think they're going to be a very attractive option in the budget katana range. And that's going to wrap up this review. Thanks for watching, and when you see my next review, it will be recorded at the new house. Until next time, Alien Toot out.